The Meg is a movie that needs no introduction. It's the biggest Jason Statham vehicle in a decade, and for a lot of kids who are too young to know what the transporter is, it's probably going to be what he's remembered for. Even if you somehow don't know what it is, the premise is pretty simple to understand. Scientists unleash a giant prehistoric shark, they can't handle it on their own, so they call in the expert, Jason Statham. Why Jason Statham? Because Jason Statham is the best at what he does, and what he does is kick shark ass. It's a dumb movie that has been memed to death. It's not scary enough to be a good thriller, it's too boring to work as a great popcorn movie, but it's just enjoyably trashy enough to make a shit ton of money at the box office. It's a movie passably enjoyed by most, hated by some, and loved by no one. I'll go ahead and say right now that it's going in the middle of the Statham Mayhem ranking because I'm just so indifferent to it. If all there was to talk about The Meg was the movie itself, there wouldn't be much to say. But what if I told you that the fact that this movie exists at all is kind of an incredible achievement that defies all odds? This movie was stuck in production hell for almost 20 years, and the entire journey of that production was fueled by a book author who was determined to make the movie happen. It's a wild ride, so you better buckle up because you're about to hear all of it. The development of The Meg began with a book titled Meg, A Novel of Deep Terror, written by Steve Alten. The book is basically the same story as the movie, with scientists unleashing two huge prehistoric sharks. But it's very clearly a horror story as opposed to an over-the-top action adventure. Steve Alten published Meg, and almost immediately after it was in talks to become a movie. In 1998, the Disney-owned company Hollywood Pictures bought the rights to the movie with plans to make The Meg compete with 1999's Deep Blue Sea. Early attempts at a script never went anywhere, and there were several that were downright laughable. One script even gave The Meg wings. After a few years of the project showing no signs of development, the rights went back to Alten, but he wasn't going to give up that easy. In 2002, he opened an online petition for the movie which earned 65,000 signatures. Then he showed his version of the script to his friend Nick Nunziata, who owns the movie website Chud.com. Nick showed it to Guillermo del Toro, who then showed it to producers. In 2004, New Line Cinema decided to take up the project with del Toro as producer. They rejected Alten's version of the script and had their own script written. They also hired director Jean de Bont, known for making Twister and Speed. They even assembled what they called a dream team of talented, well-known people in the industry to help design the visual framework of the movie. However, yet again, the project never went past pre-production. New Line wasn't satisfied with how much the movie was going to cost, and kept demanding changes to the script, removing set piece after set piece until the production budget was $100 million or lower. This prolonged fight caused pretty much all of the production crew to leave the project. After hiring new producers to oversee the movie, the studio made no new developments on it for several years. In October 2007, the rights for The Meg again went back to Steve Alten. After that point, there's not much information on what happened behind the scenes, but it took 8 long years until Warner Brothers finally decided to produce the movie in 2015. Despite finally landing at the studio that would eventually release it, the movie's troubles were far from over. Hostel director Eli Roth was originally hired for the movie, but left the project not even a year later because of even more fights about the movie's budget. It was then that Jon Turteltaub, the director of National Treasure, came on board. After that, the rest of the cast was hired, the movie was made, and even though it was pushed back from its release date of March 2018, it was eventually released in August that year. So yeah, that is the entire 20-year journey it took to get The Meg from book to screen. The fact that it even exists defies all odds, but what's even more incredible is that the movie is as okay as it is. Despite my extremely brief summary of the last 3 years of the movie's production, things were not smooth. In interviews, Jason Statham expressed disappointment in how different the final movie was from the original script. He said the original movie was darker, scarier, and more gory. There are even some parts of the movie, like the opening scene, that weren't in the script at all. This makes sense when you consider that the original book, Meg, A Novel of Deep Terror, is a horror story at its core. Even the people previously attached to the movie, Del Toro, Bont, Eli Roth, were all known for making horror and thriller movies. So this change from straight horror movie to fun summer adventure might explain why there are big chunks of the movie dedicated to a story that takes itself way too seriously, and horror scenes that aren't very scary. I think that one of two things happened. Either the studio saw the final product and said, hey, this doesn't work, and re-edited the movie to what it is now, or the director said, look, I'm the guy who made National Treasure and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. I don't know how to make a horror movie. and just decided to make a fun summer movie instead. Either way, this change in direction is apparent in the movie, because there really isn't much of those fun action set pieces that we were promised in the trailer. And the horror scenes sprinkled throughout the movie don't mix very well with the tone of the few action set pieces that we do get. It's a movie that flip-flops between being melodramatic over character deaths that you don't even care about, to having a carefree attitude about everything as if the characters themselves know what kind of movie they're in.
You know, he looks heroic and he walks fast, but he's kind of got a negative attitude.
But I think the most interesting change to the movie was the removal of gory death scenes. Both Jason Statham and the director lamented the lack of gore in the final movie. Jason Statham remarked, "Yeah, but you go, where's the fucking blood? It's like, there's a shark." And the director even said that they shot some scenes and rendered special effects so that the movie would be gory, but the studio wanted a PG-13 rating, so all of it had to be cut out. And you can see this change in the movie. There are scenes where someone or something is eaten by a shark, and all of a sudden the camera cuts in a confusing and obfuscating way, as if they're trying to hide the fact that they removed all the gore. But if you know the PG-13 rating, you know that they can get away with showing some gore and still be okay. So why isn't there any in this movie? One word: China. This movie was made almost specifically for the Chinese market. Jason Statham tends to be in a lot of action movies that are only successful in China, something that even he himself acknowledged in interviews for the movie. But The Meg is probably the biggest Chinese production that he's ever been involved in. Obviously, there's the casting of popular Chinese actors like Li Bingbing, the movie takes place off the coast of China, and the movie had a big marketing campaign in China, with the Chinese posters putting the Chinese cast members front and center. But why is China so important to why The Meg has no gore? Well, if you know anything about China, you know that they have strict censorship laws, which means that if the movie has sex, nudity, or graphic violence in it, it either won't be shown in China or it will be heavily altered. But that still doesn't explain why Warner Brothers just didn't make a gorier cut for America and a censored cut for China. I mean, it's not like movie studios don't do that already. The reason they didn't is because of a deal WB made with the China Media Capital, which basically said that the CMC would help fund a number of agreed upon movies. And the first movie to be made in this deal was The Meg. According to Deadline, 51% of the budget was provided by Chinese investors because of this deal. Basically, China is the reason that The Meg exists at all. So of course the studio wasn't going to even try to make a gory cut of the movie when over half of the funds for it came from China. Given the vast creative changes this movie went through during production and post-production, it's a miracle that this movie is as good as it is. By every account, this movie should be an unwatchable mess. It's a horror movie that was rearranged into an action movie and then cut up into pieces to appease Chinese investors. But it's somehow not terrible. It's just okay. And that's pretty incredible. Despite big chunks of the movie being a boring mess full of bad acting and stilted dialogue, it's still able to provide enough fun to avoid being a complete slog. Sure, there's not as much Jason Statham versus shark action as I would like, but the scenes of that we do get are fun as hell.
Hell yeah.
My favorite scene is at the end of the movie where Jason Statham rides the Megalodon out of the water with his bare hands and stabs it in the eye with a harpoon in mid-air. It's so hilarious and awesome that it's worth the price of admission for me. Every scene where Statham faces off against the shark is a blast, and if there was more of it, I might actually really like The Meg. One thing I do really like about this movie is, of course, Jason Statham, who, as always, is super charming in this movie. This movie was also a perfect fit for him. With his background as a professional swimmer, he was born to play this role. Even if he had done no prep work for the movie, he would have been the ideal choice. But during pre-production, he went off and swam with bull sharks anyway because he's just that much of a badass.
All of the fear goes away. The fear is on the surface and it's all in the mind. When you're down there with them, there's no fear.
The Meg is not a perfect movie. It's not even a good movie, but it is a miracle movie. It went through 3 studios, 3 directors, countless scripts, and it was cancelled twice, but it was somehow still made. It got censored and rearranged, and it is somehow still mildly entertaining. No one goes into this movie expecting high art. Even in 2018, when I saw this movie in a packed theater, no one was expecting this movie to be a moving experience that stuck with them. Sometimes, all people want is a popcorn movie that provides cheap thrills. And The Meg is proof that, when you have a movie that spent 20 years in development hell, sometimes being a forgettable popcorn movie is enough to be an impressive achievement. I'm Randall the Vandal, and thank you for watching.